Right, welcome to the Stiffs podcast. Following on from our last couple of guests, we're doing this podcast, bit of a reaction really to what we've come across the last couple of weeks. Apologies if you were waiting for the Joe Hart England episode, but our media man been a waste of time.
Having one.
Absolutely
having one.
So we can't get that out yet. So we'd have a little bit of a reaction.
Perfectionist wits, aren't you?
And a bit of a reflection on being a professional footballer, really, and what's visible to the outside world compared to the person. I mean, since the Joe Hart one in particular, the amount of people who've said to me, "Hey, Sam, Connor and Joe are good lads, aren't they?" I was like, what were you expecting them to be? I think it's the whole purpose of the podcast really is to try and sort of humanise these people who they see on television. I don't know whether any people have said anything similar to you lads, but I think everybody's been quite shocked that they're actually decent lads.
I think I've been asked numerous occasions about players over the years. I mean, the amount of people have told me they think you're a knob. So.
People said that about you. I was going to say.
You got in here just before, didn't I?
The amount of times that I've been defending you, I'm like, hey, I got better than I thought.
I have to take a shield. I have to take a shield into town with me. Yeah. Your mate, flipping, he's a right knobhead. Yeah. No, well, like we were saying just before we come on, didn't we? For me, over the years, I've always felt as though people will always have a perception of you, regardless of whether they've met you, whether they have an in-depth knowledge of you, whether they've seen you play from a distance, but also a lot of my teammates. A lot of people have spoke to me, and if they're talking about someone that they don't realise I know or I played with, they can almost put themselves in the brown stuff. But I think a lot of the time over the years, I found myself protecting teammates, and like you just said there, I often find myself going, well, of course they're good lads. They're just normal lads, aren't they?
Yeah, I think in football, it's such a sacred world, isn't it, that everybody would love to see what's going on inside, and that's what we're trying to do with our stories and getting guests on, things like that. But with that, puts these footballers on a pedestal, and you've got an opinion before you've even spoke to anybody who knows them at all. I think that's a little bit scary at times, because they might have just seen a fleeting interview, they might have caught them on a night out in town, they might have, you don't know what's going on in their life at that one point, but for whatever reason, people have bad impressions. And the amount of people who come up to me and gone, like you said, Connor's a good lad, Joe's a good lad. I'm like, obviously, yeah, they're normal guys, do you know what I mean? And
normal guys living the dream. And I suppose they just have a lot of people having it, but that's the nature of the business, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why it's great to do this though, isn't it? We can showcase what lads are like, because I've had a few people speak to me about it, and like you said, they say, oh, he's a good lad. And I'm like, when you're sat next to someone in the dressing room, it's not like we don't have any different conversations to what we would have now, or I'd have with my mates at home, that I'd have with my little boy or anything like that. You just sit there, you just talk about life as normal, don't you? And nothing else happens. I think everyone expect it to be this mystical world, but it's not at all.
Why is it you think that is, Dave? And you probably have a better knowledge of any of us in the room, but why is it, do you think it's just because football's on such a pedestal that, you know, for me, football is one of the things that is an occupation, but is also a hobby. So I was watching my son this morning play football, and behind me, you know, there was Sunday League lads playing football, and I turned to my eldest son and I was like, Harley, look at these lads here. They must love football. They love it. And it's a hobby. But the dream is...
it's a hobby when you're in it, though. I mean, I was quite good. Like Connor and Joe, I thought, like, I got the impression that they love football. But obviously, I mean, especially Joe in particular, has had some really tough times with it, you know. Yeah. It's not, it's not a hobby getting kicked in the teeth.
No, but my point is, if you've got football as a hobby, and then you think to yourself, I could actually do this for a living, and then you see someone who actually gets paid to actually like carry out your hobby, that's where the crossover is for me. Because again, you know, if I've got a plumber, he ain't doing that for a hobby, is he? That's his employment. You know, like you rightly say, when you're in football, it's different. You know, I certainly felt like for a period of my career, it felt like a job. That's what it felt like. I didn't particularly enjoy parts of it and found other areas of it difficult, but that's where I think it is. And I just wonder, like, from your perspective, do you feel like football's on such a pedestal that then people are almost, they look at you and go, God, you get to get paid for the thing that I do as a hobby?
Yeah, I think it's not just football, it's everything that's in the public eye. It's fascinating, isn't it, to the general public? I'm fascinated. I watch all the documentaries on Amazon, All or Nothings. I love NFL.
Yeah, I do.
Even all the football, the English football ones as well. I'll watch all just because you want that insight, you want that little glimpse into a dressing room, which you are so interested in. And I think people do that already. So they've got footballers, as I said, on a pedestal. They want to know what's happening inside. And for whatever reason, they'll make up their mind on someone's character by what they're doing on a pitch or what they hear in a 20-second interview where really as a footballer, when I come off a football pitch, I'm in interview mode. I'm straight back and everything. I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in any sort of trouble, anything that's going to get me any stories that are going to go out on Twitter, on Instagram.
And you might not, but someone might just get... I mean, we had it this week, didn't we? We had it this week with, obviously, Simon Jordan on TalkSport. We had it with him with Joe. He's obviously not listened to the podcast. Not sure why I wouldn't, but we had it with him, didn't we? And he's obviously seen probably a couple of tweets, or he's seen an excerpt or whatever it may be, and made an assumption that from what a conversation he's had with Nuno, he's then taken it upon himself to think that Joe's got a problem with it. Anyone who's listened to the podcast realises that Joe certainly didn't have a problem with it. He wanted the honesty. Obviously, it's not what you want to hear, but he took it all on the chin, was like, yep, no problem, let's move forward. But I suppose that's a good example, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, if you listen to in the interview, if you listen to Joe speaking a minute before and a minute after, the whole picture's different, isn't it? But that's a prime example of how the media picks up stuff. But going to what people think of players,
that's not visible, is it? Like only thing that's visible to fans is what's happening on the football pitch, and they just see someone doing something they love for, depending on level, by the way, how much money they get, and that's the only thing that's visible. So what we're hopefully trying to do is show what happens underneath that, and things like that, or someone think they've got an insight into a tough conversation. Oh my God, that conversation was brutal with Nuno. Not really. It's a harsh conversation. I could probably reel off about 15 conversations I've had with managers where they've been pretty much told me that I've been rubbish. Jimmy Quinn's told me I couldn't cross the road. Stuart Gray told me in Northampton I'll never play for Northampton. That's part of it. It's a ruthless business, and the higher up you go, the more ruthless it becomes. When it's a multi-million pound business, it is brutal.
I'm just recalling
that's why the players
said to me over the years now.
That's why the players at the top, like someone like Joe or Connor, but that conversation turns into national news. Do you know what I mean? And I just think it's
those conversations
incredible how that happens.
And it's funny, like when because I only saw a bit
so guarded. That's why football has to be so guarded, because of that prime example. They have to be so guarded.
And I quite
top end level.
I quite like that Simon Jordan at times. I think because he's so sort of he can be honest and normally picks up a good point. I was a bit disappointed with him this time around because he's clearly not listened to the podcast. And I don't know whether, you'll know better, Dave, doing the journalism, but I don't know whether he was just playing the character a little bit with Trevor Sinclair.
1,000,000%.
Really?
Doing a show, aren't they? That's what
Yeah, you need someone on one side of the argument and someone on the other.
Because what he was saying didn't have any reason or logic to it. And I was a bit baffled because normally when I listen to him, I think, he's clued up, he is. I know the way he delivers it's not for everyone, but he normally speaks sense. And I just thought it didn't feel right to me. But it's funny that you say that because I thought, is it this like a Punch and Judy episode here?
Yeah, it's a pantomime, isn't it? Yeah. They're trying to get listeners. They're trying to get clickbait.
Well, that makes me feel a bit better.
It worked though, because even my mate in Australia, he's like, "Oh, Joe, I shouldn't have been crying about that." I'm like, he wasn't crying about it. No. He wasn't crying about it. He said that was the conversation, and I went, "How did you feel?" Obviously, you feel a bit upset when someone says that to you. You're human, aren't you? Exactly, that's going to hurt. Someone tells you, "I think you're rubbish at your job." That's going to hurt. But tell you what, you've got to be resilient, and you just go, like Joe was. Oh well, never mind. Move on. I've had it loads of times. You've had it, Dave. You've had it, Shav. Where you're told
I've been battered.
You get
Nuno told me I was never going to play for him.
I have more than anyone I know, to be honest.
That's not me at the news, Dave.
When I went into Nuno's office and he was like, "Yeah, it's not going to work for you here today. Your fifth choice centre midfield, and I'm going to bring in another one as well. So if you want to go."
but that's
so you're saying there's a chance?
No, but they're those conversations that happen all of the time.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, and that is what we want to try and shine a light on those conversations, because that's the things that that the fans don't see. But also, we wouldn't need fans to realise it's a brutal business, football. Yes, it's brilliant. Yes, you earn good money. Yeah. You have fame. There's lots of good things that come with it. You're doing something you love. But it's brutal, ruthless, like any big business. I bet if you spoke to stock traders, you spoke to CEOs, it's the same. These conversations happen all the time. And in some ways, with Nuno and Pep, I think Joe himself said he actually appreciated the honesty.
Well, that's what pissed me off. That's what pissed me off a little bit about Simon Jordan. I'm not going to lie, because he was almost insinuating.
That's got in for Simon Jordan.
I know, yeah.
Well, just like
celebrity boxing match.
Do you know what? I obviously have a lot of respect for him, and he knows what he's talking about for the most part. And it's because it seemed out of character for him. And then obviously it's like he hadn't done his due diligence. But when you educated me well there, Dave, I don't know obviously a lot about journalism, and you'll know a lot more about the media than I do. But when you said about him being a bit of a caricature and playing that part. It rings true because I couldn't understand. I was like, what? Why you do it? Like, that's not like you. Because I thought he would have just gone, well, we haven't. He did say a couple of times about not hearing the other side of the story, but yeah, like you say, I mean, whatever level it is, I suppose at Joe's level, it's just magnified so much more. But I mean, you make a good point. The amount of times I've had things go on, and you just move on really quickly, and there's not a lot of fuss. Sometimes, I suppose, but sometimes at my level, you try and create a bit of fuss about it because you want to try and get a different outcome, but it never happens, does it? A manager says something, it's normally done, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't want to go on about this point all the time because we're ended up clickbaiting it as well by talking about it. But Joe used a really good phrase in his interview, perhaps used it 3 or 4 times, saying it's high-end business. And I think when you get to that end, whether it's football, whether it's other sports, whether it's in actual big operating businesses, when the tough decisions are there, they always seem harsh, don't they? You've got to do what's best for the company. And when you're a multi-million man company like Man City, like Tottenham Hotspur, do you know what I mean? You're just another number.
I think it makes it even more. I mean, how long were you at Wolves, Dave? 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
I mean, that's made all the more impressive for me that you can be at a club of such high profile for 10 years and not have to have that conversation. I know it eventually came down the line with Nuno and that was fine. You know, like you say, you dealt with it.
Yeah, well, this will sum up high-end business again. Wolves, so I'd been at the club for 10 years, felt like I'd given my absolutely everything. I walked in one morning to be told they've accepted a bid for me. Came in after training. Yep, you're off. You need to go down to Reading. Everyone else had left. I left 15 minutes later with a bin bag, all my stuff in. Never went back there. Do you know what I mean? 10 years of my life to the football club and you go out the back door. And that felt like a bit wrong at the time. But I thought, that's football. Everyone does it. Do you know what I mean? Everyone leaves a bin bag full of their boots, don't they? And
like you spend years at a club, like every club you've been at, 2 years at Northampton, right?
And football moves on quickly, doesn't it?
I got a phone call at Northampton, not even off the manager, off the assistant.
Oh,
he sat opposite the manager. Sam Wrexham want to sign me. I was going, I don't know, like Wrexham, and I can't remember what they were. Wrexham was struggling in League 2. I was in League 1. I'm going, I don't know. And he's gone, well, the gaffer's just said to me, you'll not be involved in any of the squads for Northampton moving forward. He's on the bus telling them that. So I'm on the phone going, okay, well...
Can you put the gaffer on the phone?
Yeah, can you put the gaffer on? No, he's busy. He's busy. He's looking at TikTok. So I was like, all right then. It's just ruthless, isn't it? But yeah, some people might seem that as being ridiculously harsh, which it is harsh, but it's just part of it, isn't it? And people don't see that. And we want to sort of emphasize, we want to show that these conversations happen, but we really want to show that they're quite normal. Yeah. And I mean, the people who work in businesses will probably say they have similar conversations.
Yeah.
But how tough footballers are just to get on with it.
Yeah,
it's
resilient.
Just roll up their sleeves, right? I'm off then. New chapter. My family's moving with me again. Off we go.
There's no one I know who hasn't been in the game 15, 20 years at whatever level that hasn't got a level of resilience. There's no one I mix with.
It's a key attribute, isn't it? Obviously, apart from talent and effort, resilience is absolutely huge because you will get knocked back. Yeah. You will get released. I think I was reading about Declan Rice getting released. He's 14 because obviously with the academy system, like lads are getting released and things. Yeah, so that's not part of it. It's part of it. Yeah,
there was a brilliant moment when I left Shrewsbury. I signed for Grays and I was there for a period of time, but didn't enjoy my time there. But I always remember Justin Edinburgh was the manager, and we came in training one morning. And there was 2 players there, a lad called Jamie Stewart and a lad called Stuart Thurgood. Great, like good lads, but properly dominated the changing room, were like proper clubmen. They were set in stone. And they'd had a previous run-in. I can't remember where they'd played under a guy called Gary Hill. Don't know if you know him, bit of a sort of non-league manager legend. And there was whispers that Gary Hill was coming in to be the manager. So we were all sat around, we're not training, lads, you'll have to wait. So we sat around for about an hour and a half, wondering what was going on. Next thing you know, Justin Edinburgh's put his head through the door and gone, lads, all the best, I'm off. We were like, oh, flipping heck. Like, yeah, all the best, just see you later. And then Gary Hill walks in. So Gary Hill basically walks in and says, none of you are good enough, but we've got to get through this season. Did the whole proper battle cry. And then we went up, there was like a gym behind the ground, like a sports hall gym, like a five-a-side gym. So the new assistant, who didn't really know, took us for a bit of a session upstairs. So then we got whispered there was something had gone on, and Jamie Stewart and Stuart Thurgood had just walked out of the ground. I'm not playing for him. And they were like the 2 biggest players at the club at the time who held court, and they just went, I'm not playing for him. And then by the time we got back down again, Gary Hill had done this big battle cry, was nowhere to be seen. And then Justin come back through the door, come walking across the stand. We're like, Justin's over there. CJ's come in and went, lads, I'm the manager again. Lovely to see you all. Try and forget about today if you can. Yeah. But what had happened is the two players had refused. So the chairman had called them, gone, what are you doing? And now we're not playing for him. He stitched us up when we were at this other club for money and stuff like that. So he went up to Gary Hill and went, Gary, yeah, sorry, the contract's in the bin. See you later. Call Justin. Will you come back? And like, how brutal is that? I mean, that's frightening, isn't it? It's like an episode of EastEnders.
I tell you what, people would say that what is visible as well. People think about the money, don't they? People go, oh, stop whinging, you got money. Like, first of all, like, there's two parts to that. First part, that's if you're in the Premier League. Like, 3/4 of footballers aren't in the Premier League and aren't on 80 grand a week. So what you need to do, I've got first-hand experience, this is when people say to me, what are you going to do when you retire? I used to go, let's play golf in Portugal. I'm not playing golf in Portugal. No. I'm working at Brosley. I've got to shoot off from the next to school now.
Sitting in the shed doing a podcast.
So people say you're going to make loads, it's all brilliant earning money to do something you love. Of course, that's brilliant. And we're not whinging because it's amazing to do the football, but that it's not like you're going to be hugely rewarded financially for the majority of footballers. And obviously the ones who do, brilliant, because they can set themselves up, they can set their families up, fantastic for them, great opportunities. But then they get all that media scrutiny with it as well.
The pressure intensifies.
You said about like Gareth
pressure.
Bale, you said about Gareth Bale, which is amazing when you said you wouldn't swap your life for Gareth Bale's, and you think everybody would think, wow, I'd love to be Gareth Bale. I don't know, would you love to be Gareth Bale? I don't know if I necessarily.
Parts of Gareth Bale, I would love it.
I'd like his left foot.
I'd love to be as quick as him.
I'd like his golf swing.
Yeah. I think, like you say, I think there's elements for both, isn't there? I think what we understand is that at high end, you have the luxury of being in a financially secure place. So I suppose from that aspect, you can be a bit relatively carefree, can't you? Knowing that, look, you're going to be all right.
Yeah, carefree from the point of view you've got no financial worries.
But your ego's telling you that when you're getting battered in the press and the media and in the papers,
it's not even just you though, is it? It's your family. I think that's the worst bit.
Yeah, of course.
It's like I remember playing for Northampton. I was getting some stick on the crowd. I remember Holly was like in the crowd and she got really upset. And obviously for me, I'm like, you have to just, it's water off a duck's back, isn't it? Because you're resilient, because you expect it. But you don't want your wife to hear that, or you don't want your family. I remember at Sunderland, Kev Kilbane was getting terrible stick at Sunderland, and his wife was there, and he was with the family, and it was really upsetting. And you think, and I know they've paid their money, and so they can shout things, and they're not thinking of the human aspect of how upsetting that could be for a family or for your children, it's school or whatever. They're just shouting and seeing you as that person on there, what's visible to them.
I'd exactly the same. Like my wife Holly and my sister. Mate,
it's worse as a manager because you lose a few games.
Yeah,
terrible stick.
Well, I suppose the playing side sort of set up the managing side, because I remember playing away at Macclesfield, and my wife Holly, we haven't got the same wife by the way, both called Holly. That would be a bit weird. And my sister were just like proper like struggling and getting irate with some of the stick that we're getting from the opposition supporters, from the Macclesfield fans. And obviously after the game, I'm finding this hilarious in the car on the way home. I can't stop laughing because they're genuinely hurt and like cannot believe they said that. And obviously I understand it's part of it. So going into being a manager, listen, if you haven't got broad shoulders, if it can't be a water off a duck's back, you cannot do that job. There's no way in the world at any level being a manager you can do it. And well,
anything in the public eye, doing a podcast. I'm sure there might have been some, like, I don't know, Sam's rubbish on the podcast. It's like, well, Sam interrupts all the time.
Not in Uganda, there isn't.
Can we just pause just to mention that, please? The second biggest podcast in Uganda.
Wow.
I was just saying to Dave before, I'm going to Uganda in the summer, aren't I? I'm going to go there as a little trip. I'll be treated like a hero. It'll be like
in the Stiffs ambassador.
It'll be like what's it? Be like coming to America. It's going to ride into Uganda.
You can.
Sam's here, everybody.
You can be
I'm a big deal.
You can be Hakeem. I'll be Semi.
Yeah.
You can be the dad, Dave. Yeah. That'd be brilliant.
McDowell's.
Yeah, the McDowell's. What a film that is! Film. Unbelievable.
Uganda.
There's got a bit in my head now, and bearing in mind this is in my head. There's a billboard in Uganda with us on it somewhere, with even the Stiffs logo and us three, just with a big cheesy smile. Very unlikely, but I'd love to think that was the case.
I'd like to think, though, people sort of, when Joe was speaking, it was great to sort of see the personality, wasn't it, a little bit, and really, again, that human aspect of it, that, it's difficult and it's going to hurt, but you've got to be so mentally strong. But also, when he mentioned about his dad, You know, that's his dad that was hurt, you know, by Pep's comments. His dad was angry about that, whereas Joe's like, it is what it is, isn't it? I appreciate your honesty, Pep. Yeah, I'll move on. Whereas your family are the ones who are affected. I think that's what's hard to take sometimes, isn't it? You wouldn't want to see your wife, your kids upset. I think it's hard being a manager, and I think you've definitely... I think being manager at Telford was...
Mate, it's such a great learning experience because you find out about yourself as well, don't you? And like the nature of what you want to do is you want to try and protect your players, so you try and put yourself right at the front so they don't get any stick, and it's even more intensified. But brilliant learning experience. Like I definitely recommend it.
Social media and all that's a killer now, though, isn't it? Because you can't, especially like you're saying, if you've had a bad game. I mean, fortunately there wasn't so. All there was back in my day, if I had a bad game, it would be in the Shropshire Star on the Monday. It would be Sam Easton 3 out of 10. Disappointing. Disappointing. Withdrawn on 55 minutes. That'd be it. But that'd be it. It'd be gone now. I just go, oh dear, put that in the bin. Let's put that to bed. But now, you know, you can go back, can't you? People going, you're rubbish, you're terrible, you were useless, and you think, oh my god.
I think like when I was at Wolves, mate, and you used to open Twitter after game, you see the little blue dot on the notification. You think I daren't touch it. I used to like touch it a few times, so it goes like all the way down, so you'd have to refresh it again, and then just turn it off again quickly. That was me, because you can't listen. I when I was younger, you'd catch a comment and it would kill me. It would.
I can honestly say
I could have 3 or 4 comments saying amazing today, brilliant. There'd be one saying like, Edwards is absolutely shite. What is he doing? How is he playing for this football club? And that one over 100 nice ones would just kill me, mate. It'd kill me.
For me, as a player, well, you know, I used to look at it all the time, and it played me like a fiddle. You know what I mean? I'd be up and down like, did you see that? What a great header at the back post from Cowan. Like, Cowan, he's the worst player we've ever had at the club. Do you know what I mean? And you're like so up and down. But as a manager, I can honestly say I engaged in nothing. I took none of it on because I start to understand that there's a very small minority of people that only go on there really like purposely just to be negative.
Yeah, but Eddie Hearn tells a great story where Eddie Hearn, have you seen the clip? Eddie Hearn's got a message through on his Twitter or something, like he's put like his picture of him boarding a plane or something. And he's had a comment like, I hope the plane crashes and dies. So Eddie Hearn's gone, I'm going to respond to that. And he's responded with something like, I think that seemed a little bit harsh or something. Whatever he's put a response. And the bloke's gone, oh wow, wasn't expecting a response. And it's like, he's a real person.
Hope you're well, Eddie.
That's something like that,
Safe trip.
Great to get a message from you, Eddie. Screenshot it, send it all his mates.
And it does like, as you get a bit older, you understand it's more about the person posting it, isn't it? So I think like you can't get, because I suppose when I left Telford, I thought, getting a bit of stick there or whatever. And again, I refused to go on there because I was totally blocking out the noise, and I was like, self-belief, believe in what you're doing. Don't let anyone deter you. Try and be that leader for the players or whatever. And then when you come away, I've got so many well wishers. Do you know what I mean? And obviously I've been saying, oh mate, getting absolutely battered on Twitter. And I was like, well, that's not my concern. My concern is doing my job. And then you get so many people who come out and are like, oh, brilliant, and thanks so much for all your efforts and all of that. And again, it's going to go, like, if you see people in the town, everyone's lovely. But if you go on social media, people are going to hammer you, aren't they?
I used to completely switch off to it, Wolves. When I become aware of it, I'd be like, right, I can't listen to this. But then my brother would say, oh, they're hammering you today. I'm like, what? Don't tell me.
Why are you telling me that?
Why would you say that?
Why send you a screenshot of someone hammering you? Why are you sending that to me? Don't send it to me.
Wilson, my youngest boy, he came into me once. He's like, Daddy. I was like, yeah. He said, you lost 3-1 today. I went, yeah. He said, someone's commented on the bottom, typical of Cowan's team. I was like, yeah, turn it off, son. Turn it off.
I think that's something why I think sometimes the footballers get accused of being a bit arrogant, because I think they have to shut their minds off from that, don't they? And you have to be in a mindset whereas you can't let that affect you, and you've got to be single-minded. I think Joe is very single-minded like that, and resilient, whereas those conversations bounce off him now. That negativity just bounces off him.
You've got to be robotic as a footballer, as a high-end footballer now. High-end. I mean, you can't engage in anything, you can't say anything controversial, you just got to get on with it. And I speak to Joe a lot, and he's always like, I don't listen to news, I don't do anything. And that's fine, but his family still listen to it. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
His mum will hear it, his dad, his sister, they'll hear it, but he's got to be the man in it and say, no, I don't want to know, just don't tell me. And
he like, the feeling I got from him, he's like, when it comes to that, he's like granite, isn't he? He's just not interested in that whatsoever.
He knows what his important things are like. He always says control the controllables, doesn't he? So he controls what he can do himself. looks after his family, does good things. But
and that's got to come from self-belief as well, because you got to believe in yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, but to be a footballer, you've got to have.
Is that
top footballer? You've got to have huge self.
So is that where the constant accusation of footballers of arrogance comes from? That huge self-belief. Do you think that's mistaken?
Yeah, a little bit, but also I think people just call them arrogant because a lot of people are jealous.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's like you jealous someone. Oh, he loves himself.
Because personally, I've never gone on. Like, I'm not massive on social media, but I've never gone on social media to be negative about. I've never commented a negative comment about another individual ever. And I do wonder about the mentality.
People trawling through your social media.
I'm not sure about that.
Mate,
you've sent me some
I've only just got on Twitter. Sam's been trying to get me on Twitter for 10 years.
Just so I can here.
Yeah. I've never seen that.
I think jealousy is a massive thing.
Well, it's why now. Again, I think we've brought this up on previous podcasts. I think with Connor, didn't we? Back in our day, we would go and sit in the Duncar or something and have a beer and chat to all the fans. They can't do it now because there's so many people who will have a pop. There's 90% of people would be great, but there's people trying to catch you out, stitch you up, and then you get accused of, he's arrogant, he loves himself, or you got people trying to speak to you when you're having a meal or something, like a meal with your wife, or you could be having an argument with your wife and someone comes across, I get a picture and I'm a bit busy at the moment. Oh, he loves himself, he's arrogant. Well, hold on a minute, I'm in the middle of I'm having an argument with your wife.
It's our 10th wedding anniversary. Can we join a meal? Or?
Yeah.
It's amazing, really, isn't it? And like, it'd be great to get an insight from like the supporters' perspective, because again, since being a kid, you've never been on that side of the fence, never been able to have that opinion. The only thing is like watching my son Wilson this morning play football, and I can see how people get so emotional with it. Even just my 10-year-old son, just want him to do so well, want the team to do well, but not at the expense of not conducting themselves in the right way, or not at the expense of the pure desire to win, I suppose. It's different, is it? I just find football supporters are very emotional with every kick.
So the only difference really between a footballer and normal lads is probably that they have to be a bit more resilient because they're in the public eye. But that's the same as anybody in the public, not just footballers. That's if you're in a band.
You get them at home, in their safe pace, closed doors, normal.
What was it like when you were in a band?
I should have been in a band. That'd have been amazing.
Yeah.
I'd be like a curly-haired Freddie Mercury.
A little bit like Jimmy Nail.
But as a podcast, we said if we get guests on, which obviously we decided, and telling our stories, we wanted to help people understand what happens inside a football club, what happens inside a dressing room, then how normal lads are. And I think we've been able to do that with Joe and Connor. And moving forward, that's exactly what we're trying to represent, isn't it? We want people to understand that just good guys, do you know what I mean? They're friends, they're mates in the change rooms. It's just like your mate at school, exactly the same. There's nothing different.
These lads, definitely.
And the conversations you have in a dressing room, you'll still be talking about what's on the TV. You'll be talking about a football match at the weekend. You'll be talking about your family. Nothing changes because you're in the public eye, like we said.
Well, even when we're not recording with Connor and Joe, we're having chats and we're having banter in the same way I would do with like my mates from Newcastle or your mates. It's exactly the same. There's no difference. There's no hierarchy. There's no talk of status. There's absolutely, which I cannot get across enough to everybody. There is no big time.
No.
Ever. It just doesn't happen.
I don't know how you felt when we were with Joe. I felt it was like going back in time. From obviously the stories, and he's obviously an experienced, mature man, and there's differences there. But in terms of that element of being a bunch of lads in a room, just didn't feel like anything.
Someone would have told you at 14, 15, 16 years old that you'll be sitting in an apartment of a goalkeeper who played 75 times for England, won the Premier League, won the Scottish Cup, done all this stuff. I'd have
said, I've never played in goal.
And you'd have pinched yourself, wouldn't you? Now we're doing it, and he's a normal guy.
Yeah,
he's making us a coffee.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the best.
And buying us a
yeah, bit too much sugar in that.
Yeah, but I think that's always going to be hard to get across to supporters, isn't it? I think that's the whole purpose of our podcast, what we're trying to do. And even though I think to a point, which is interesting speaking to Joe about, even when you have money, and obviously, say someone like Joe would have earned a phenomenal amount of money in his career, but that doesn't mean that you have no problems. That doesn't mean you have no feelings. You've got, yes, you haven't got the worries that some people might have got from paying the gas bill or whatever, but that doesn't stop loneliness, doesn't stop your career, doesn't stop difficulties, doesn't stop down. I mean, Dave was amazing when you admitted about you playing in the Premier League, and yet you're on antidepressants. So I think, you know, you get to a certain level. I listened to a podcast the other day, I can't remember what it was called, Dr. Chattery or something like that it was called. He was saying there's been loads of research. When you get to a certain level, once you've got a roof over your head and you've got food in the cupboard and stuff, when you get to a certain level, like there's no correlation between the amount of money you've got and how happy you are. You know, once obviously when you've got a base level, you don't want to patronise someone and say, you know, if you've got no money or you can't pay bills, of course that's worrying. But once you get to a certain level, it doesn't make a difference.
And once you're at that level and then you escalate up to a top international footballer, Premier League star, the pressure's on that person.
Yeah,
if you're living a comfortable life and you don't have to worry about your bills and things like that, then you have a Premier League footballer who's on 300 grand a week. The pressure they're under is immense.
Yeah, the pendulum swings a little bit from the money problems to the actual, I suppose, day-to-day logistics of life.
There'll be loads of people who'll hear that comment there and they'll go, well, yeah, you know, it can't be any problems if you're on 300 grand a week. But it's still, you know, we spoke about before, when you retire, if you retire and you've got millions of pounds in the bank, yes, it gives you opportunities, but also you do need a bit of a purpose sometimes, don't you, to get up in the morning and things. So everybody will probably say, oh, that's ridiculous.
Well, like you say, we don't want to patronise people because like, ultimately, you know, if you can find yourself in a position where you haven't...
Well, I'm not being patronised because I didn't earn 25 million or...
No, of course, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I suppose, but there's people who, like you say, who would argue that point. And yes, I'm sure Joe's life in terms of the material world is slightly more comfortable than others, but I do think it brings on huge psychological pressures day to day, like what he has to put his body through. The fact that he's staying in Scotland away from family.
He's got good biomechanics though, apparently. That's come up with.
Listen, that's a top word. Stop coming for me on my vocabulary, please. We've got some brilliant words.
So lads, to sum up, what are the key attributes to be a professional footballer, and what would we like to shine a light on for the podcast moving forward?
Dave?
I think to be a professional footballer, or how to sustain yourself as a professional footballer. Sustain yourself as a professional, because you can get your foot in the door, can't you? But actually to stay there and do it for 15, 20 years is a lot different, isn't it? And I think that the key word we spoke about a lot is resilience, coping with the emotions of football, coping with the knockbacks. Both guests we've had have had knockbacks, like even Conor Cody, you think would have his career's really on an upwards curve. But before Nuno came in at Wolves, he wasn't getting played. He was getting played out of position. He was on the bench. All these things you got to deal with. He didn't know if he was going to leave, all stuff like that. And then Joe was like, his resilience is just, it's incredible. Like, I even question myself. I find myself as a resilient person, but to go through what Joe went through so publicly and then come out the other end and be in the position he's in, that's insane to me.
What result from yesterday?
Yeah.
Today.
Was
it today?
It's Sunday. Yeah, it's Sunday today.
Oh,
today.
So an old
it's coming out. It's coming out in 2 days. Yeah. So
what result that was anyway?
What result that was 2 days ago?
2.5 days ago.
So yeah, I think resilience, a little bit of luck, obviously, as well. Yeah. You need a little bit of luck with injuries and things like that. But
I think if we can get the guests to talk about the tough times and the difficulties, like we did with Joe, it's brilliant. Say, like we're saying again, to humanise them and to emphasise the resilience needed. Yeah.
And there's a couple that, obviously we're not going to name names just yet, but there's a couple that we're planning on hopefully coming on that would be unbelievable for that subject.
Yeah,
unbelievable for that subject.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them to open up about what it's like not just in the dressing room. We want the funny stories sometimes, but we also want to tap into the mentality.
Two bits on, like one on each podcast with Joe and with Conor that got me, that proper got, the whole spine tingling and that. When Joe spoke about the FA Cup, when he won first time he won the FA Cup, and he just went, FA Cup. Even now, it's like fucking FA Cup. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And then the other bit with Conor was when he was talking about the comeback pre-season, and he played him centre of a three at the back, and like we thought it was going to be this unbelievable conversation between Nuno and him. Do you remember? And he was going to go, and I've seen something, and what do you think about this? And he just played him there, and he was going, heck, am I just making up the numbers? So he was still having them thoughts we've all had over the years of like, am I getting pushed out here? Am I just making up? Is this the second team or is it the first team?
And it took him to speak to his dad and say, Dad, I think I'm not in his plans. He's playing me middle of a back three.
And his dad's just gone, well, be the best you can be in that position. And now he's like playing for England.
in that position.
And he's the captain in that position.
And he's won the captain's armband.
They're the
for
two
England.
bits that just, for me, just proper got me.
Yeah.
Proper got me, yeah.
It's been brilliant having those two on, though. It's been amazing.
Yeah, class. Great lads.
Some standard now to live up to, though, isn't it? So if any listeners know
God.
any very famous people that they can...
With a real good story with resilience. I want them to have had a few knockbacks and I want them to be really...
Can we do a poll? Because I'm sure we can get Jeff Minton on. Brilliant.
I think, obviously, I think a lot of people might have been expecting Joe on this week, but like I said, we've had a few editing difficulties, so he'll be on next week. But I think it's quite good to give it a little bit of time.
And it's a long podcast, wasn't it? It was 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
like
it was a long
we were
time.
5 hours recording up in Edinburgh, so we had to split it up, obviously, into 3 episodes. I think gives everyone just a chance to digest it. When if we rattle 3 out really quickly, then it's, I don't know, you can get lost a little bit. So I think it's
The England one for me as well is like so emotionally like overwhelming. I mean, that's the way he talks about it is like mind-boggling, isn't it?
I don't think that 2 hours though. I thought it might be a problem, but no one has said to me that it was too long.
No,
Not long enough.
And I mean, this one's going to be a little bit shorter, but people are probably going to turn off. People are tuned in to listen to Joe Hart, haven't they? They're going to go, when's Joe coming on?
If you're still listening now, you're in a small margin, very small percentage.
We've still got the downloading anyway, so we're all right. We've still got the numbers up, haven't we? Not that we're about that. And hopefully in Uganda they've liked it again anyway.
Yeah, mate, we'll be number one in Uganda.
Apparently they got bored of Joe. They got bored of Joe. Apparently in Uganda, they just wanted us three.
That's the only reason we're doing it. The Ugandans have sent a message.
What was number one in Uganda? How number two?
I didn't even look. It'll be us now.
What was it? Did anybody know what it was?
Salopcast, I think, on it.
Yeah, Salopcast.
So Shropshire boys are just massive in Uganda.
As well. They've just won an award as well.
Yeah, shout out to them, by the way.
Yeah, they've just won. What was the award? Sorry,
best social and equality. If I word that right. Equality. Yeah, but it's amazing. So I know these guys really well, and I've worked with them with the Little Rascals Foundation, and it's Tettenhall Wood School, which sort of helps children with learning disabilities. They've set up a podcast. The children do the podcast themselves. Brilliant. They have amazing guests on. So if you get a chance to listen to that, the TWS Sports Podcast, I think it's called. They're number one in Uganda. Yeah. But no, that's amazing. They've had some amazing guests. I mean, Joe's been on that as well. Lots of cricketers and things like that. Brilliant. Yeah, check it out. We're all for promoting other guys as well. Right then, lads. So join us next week, everybody, please. Next one is the big one, isn't it? Joe Hart talking about England. I'm excited. Are we doing one about me playing for England C, or is it just... I think we're going to leave it there. We're leaving that for the start of the second series, the big one. That's the big one, let's be honest. The C, England C. But that would get us number one in Uganda. Go on, what did you? All I'm saying is there was England C played Wales C last week. Let's move on anyway. That'll do. 4-0 to Wales C. 4-0 up after 35 minutes. Why do I even open my big mouth? How's that happen? So just the boys in. You have to play in the Welsh. Worth it is a couple of Bala lads as well. What are their names, Dave? Scored a brace. Will Evans scored a brace from Bala, and then Alex Ramsey, the goalkeeper, kept a clean sheet. Since Gav's not been playing for that England C, it's gone downhill. It's gone through the floor. They're in tatters. They're in tatters. I've had to polish my boots this morning. Right, thanks for listening, everyone. Sorry it wasn't Joe Hart, this one, but hopefully you enjoyed it. As always, give us some feedback. Although, if it's negative, we're not going to read it. But yeah, and I've had loads of people keep coming up to me as well and saying how much they've enjoyed it, which is brilliant, isn't it? Me too. At the Shrewsbury match as well. We love that, don't we? Yeah. So, I think Sam said it before. If anyone gets the chance, if you see us, come over and tell us what you think, positive or negative. Any feedback would be good. And give us some suggestions for guests. We've got one in the bag, and we don't forget. Yes. Yeah. Oh, we've got a fascinating one we've already recorded. Yeah. Fascinating one. We've got some good people lined up, haven't we? But anybody else the listeners can think of. Or unless you just want us three to keep going on, no guests, we can do that as well. might get a bit boring, mightn't it? We'll get the guests going, I think. Right, thanks very much for listening. As always, please like our Instagram, our Twitter and our Facebook @InTheStiffs. And tune in next week for the Joe Hart episode. It's going to be amazing. It is amazing. Thanks very much for listening.